kingdom of Azure is throwing the party of the century. Word is the hero, and all four of his sages actually survive the final battle with the Demon Lord. Ephodal can barely swallow. For a guy born into a dirt-poor, noble family, this whole grand parade feels like a fever dream. He walks down the carpet to a literal wall of sound. The crowd is losing it, screaming for their return as if they were their own sons. Up on the throne, the king raises a hand to quiet the cheering. He's ready to officially thank the men who just saved their world. The group drops to one knee. They did their part, and now it's time for the crown to do its. There are four sages: earth, water, fire, and finally Ephodal, the sage of wind. He looks more stressed than he did during the war. The king doesn't hold back. He's granting them the title of the Four Emperors, the absolute highest rank a mage can reach. Ephodal freezes in shock. It's the kind of honor that changes a bloodline forever. Usually, names like that are reserved for the highest of the highborn, not some eighth son from a family with no money to their name. After everything they went through to put the Demon Lord down, the king wants to make sure the world knows their names. Being one of the four emperors means holding absolute influence over every mage in society. Looking at the symbols of power, Ephodal realizes this reward is way more than he ever dared to hope for. The king calls his name specifically. Ephodal snaps to attention, his heart hammering against his ribs. He bows his head low. The king tells him to use this newfound authority wisely, both in magic and in life. The crown is heavy, but the weight of the moment is even heavier. Ephodal can't even look up. From this day forward, the king announces, you shall be known as Emperor Stormgale. He repeats the name in his head, still in total disbelief. Me? An emperor? The floodgates just open. He starts sobbing right there in front of the king, unable to hold back 40 years of exhaustion and relief. The crowd erupts again, chanting, long live the four emperors, until the walls shake. Through the tears, he realizes this is it. 40 years of grinding and pouring his soul into magic have finally been repaid. Fast forward 15 years, and those glory days are a distant memory. The setting is much quieter now. Ephodal has aged significantly. The sharp eyes are still there, but there's a weariness in them that wasn't there before. He dismisses his students for the day, telling them to enjoy themselves until dinner. He's got his own research to get back to. As soon as they're gone, the coughing starts. It's violent, racking his whole body as he collapses to the ground. He looks down at his hand, and it's covered in dark, thick blood. It's a bad sign. This demon's disease is relentless. He knows his clock is ticking, and he's running out of time to finish his work. A voice calls out to him, and he tries to pull himself together. It's his disciple, Merlin. Merlin asks why he's still pushing himself so hard while he's sick. She's genuinely worried he's going to work himself into an early grave. His mind drifts back to a much darker time when a castle was crumbling and everything was on fire. In the middle of that chaos, he found something that changed the entire trajectory of his life. It was a baby elf, crying in the wreckage of a war that wasn't hers. He found the child's mother nearby. She was a demonkin, and she was fading fast. With her last breath, the mother begged him to save her daughter. Ephodal didn't hesitate. He took the child and ran. Back in the present, he remembers that he's essentially the reason her race still exists at all. Merlin just stares at him. She knows he's hiding how bad it really is. He gives her a weak smile and brushes it off. He says he keeps going because he wants his disciples to have someone they can be proud of. He looks over his old crown. He spent his whole life trying to be the strongest sorcerer in the world. He tells her that anyone who picks up a staff dreams of reaching the top, and he was no different. Merlin won't hear it. She insists that he's already at the peak, and that nobody's magic can touch his. He chuckles. Sure, compared to a normal person, he's a god. But he knows the truth. In the face of real, raw power, he feels like a complete amateur. He thinks about the true geniuses, the ones born with overwhelming talent. Next to them, he feels like he's achieved nothing at all. During the quest to slay the Demon Lord, Ephodal was the senior member, yet he was the one constantly struggling to keep pace with the others. His thoughts are interrupted by a messenger arriving with what sounds like game-changing news. The kid is completely winded, but he manages to get the words out. Lord Blazesoul has actually done it. He's figured out a way to measure magical aptitude. Ephodal reads the letter with wide eyes. A reliable way to test magical potential has been the dream of every mage since the beginning of time. It's so simple he can hardly believe it. He's genuinely impressed that his old comrade managed to pull this off after 40 years. He doesn't waste any time. He gathers his students, telling them it's time to put this new process to the test right now. They set up the gear, 4 test tubes filled with specific solutions. Merlin is the first volunteer, though she's a little hesitant about the hair-pulling part. They drop a strand into each tube and wait for the reaction. The whole room lights up as the chemicals react to her hair, producing a brilliant glow that has everyone staring. Merlin's eyes go wide. The blue and green tubes are practically humming with light. Effidal checks the notes. The colors correspond to different elements, and the brighter they shine, the higher the natural talent. The results are insane. Merlin's got an S rank in both wind and water, making her a literal natural-born prodigy. Merlin is stunned, but Effidal isn't. Seeing the results with his own eyes just confirms that Blaise Sal's research is the real deal. Under the old system, you had to train for 10 years just to find out what you were good at. It was a massive waste of time. But with this, you can find out what a kid is built for the day they're born and start training them the right way immediately. Now that he's seen it work, Effidal wants a turn. He needs to see what his own numbers look like. Merlin tries to talk him out of it. She thinks it's unnecessary. The man is already one of the 4 emperors, so obviously his talent is through the roof. But he's made up his mind. He sits down, letting the students pull his hair while the rest of the class leans in, eager to see the show. The students are buzzing with excitement, thinking they're about to witness some legendary tear glow from their master. For Effidal, this is personal. He spent his whole life wondering if he really had the natural gift to reach the top. He thinks back to the endless hours of grueling training he put himself through just to stay competitive with the geniuses around him. But when he looks at the results, his eyes go wide in total disbelief. Whatever he's seeing, it's not the glorious validation he was hoping for. The test tubes sit there, completely clear. Not a single drop of color in any of them. It's a junk result. According to the system, colorless liquid means the subject has 0 natural talent for magic. Effidal can't believe it. If this test is telling the truth, it means not a single elemental spirit ever bothered to bless him. He sits there in total shock. How could a man crowned as Emperor Stormgale have no actual talent? They try redoing the test, thinking they must have messed something up in the process. But it doesn't matter how many times they try. Every single tube stays perfectly transparent. Merlin stands outside his room, listening to the constant coughing coming from inside. The sign on the door is clear, do not enter. Inside, the aging Effidal is a mess, coughing up blood alone in his bed. He looks at his hands, thinking back on his long career. He's always had a feeling something was missing. While the other sages were gifted and rose to the top with ease, he was always struggling just to keep pace. Now the truth is out. He reached the peak of magic while being absolutely talentless. He survived monsters and demons that should have killed him, but he never had a moment to breathe or lament his lack of gifts. It feels pitiful. He spent his whole life clinging to a hollow hope that he could reach the pinnacle if he just had more time. He curses his own luck, calling himself a talentless fool as the frustration boils over. With one final, violent cough, his body gives out entirely. Suddenly, magic circles begin to spin and glow with a mechanical hum. A system message appears in the darkness. Reincarnation skill activated. Effidal wakes up on a shimmering floor, wondering where the hell he is. He looks down at his hands and realizes he's young again. He hasn't seen this version of himself in over 50 years. That's when a giant goddess descends from the sky, greeting him like an old friend. She smiles, telling him she's impressed. Apparently, he survived everything thanks to a hidden skill called Unbreakable Will. She offers him a second chance at life through reincarnation. She starts listing off special skills like accelerated growth, but Effidal shuts her down immediately. He doesn't want them. He tells her he has everything he needs. As long as he has his own will and enough time to put in the effort, he can do anything. The goddess is surprised, but she finishes the selection process anyway. She asks if he's ready to go. He just nods and thanks her. With a final wish for good luck, she sends him off in a blinding flash of light. A young boy stirs in his sleep, groaning as his head starts to throb. He sits up with a scream as the memories from his previous life start flooding in. He grabs his head, trying to process everything that's happening. All those years are rushing back at once. He wanders over to the mirror, staring at the unfamiliar child looking back at him. It's him. He's been reborn as a 4-year-old named Effidal, just like the goddess promised. He clenches his fist, determined to become the strongest mage in the world for real this time. He takes a deep breath to calm his nerves before getting to work. He sets up his own DIY aptitude test using glasses of water on the table. He dips his finger in, praying that this time, the spirits will finally give him some natural talent. He looks at the water and just sighs. It's still clear. Absolutely nothing changed. He heads outside, feeling a bit down about having to start from rock bottom all over again. He flops onto the grass, wondering if hard work can really overcome a total lack of talent. He stares up at the sky, terrified that this life will just be a repeat of his last one. Suddenly, he spots something moving in the clouds above. A massive dragon descends from the sky, its shadow looming over the entire area. He looks up and sees it, a massive dragon screaming through the sky. Not exactly the best start to a new life. The thing looks absolutely furious, its eyes glowing with rage. Effidal starts running, wondering what could have possibly set it off. He's panting, realizing that if that dragon reaches the houses, it's going to be a total massacre. He has to do something, but what? The knights are already on the move, but they're way too slow. The beast is heading straight for the capital, and it's not planning on just visiting. Ephidel looks at his tiny 4-year-old hands. He wishes he'd asked the goddess for a head start, or at least his original tier 10 spell. Wait, maybe he doesn't need to ask. The dragon roars as the knights charge in, but Ephidel is already focusing. A spark of magic starts to hum in his palm. Suddenly, a massive magic circle erupts right in front of him. Even he looks shocked by the sheer scale of the thing. It keeps expanding, light pulsing through the air. He didn't think it would be this easy to tap back into his peak power. A pillar of blinding white lightning shoots up into the sky, dwarfing the knights and the mountain behind them. They can only stare in total disbelief. The lightning catches the dragon midair, engulfing the entire beast in a chaotic web of electricity. It doesn't even have time to scream. Ephidel falls back onto the grass, smoking and stunned. He actually did it. He cast the original spell he named after himself. He blinks, trying to clear his head, while the echoes of the thunder still ring in his ears. Suddenly, a massive splash of black soot and debris hits the ground right next to him. He covers his head, barely avoiding the falling remains. He yells out in shock as the charred skull of the dragon rolls to a stop. The thing was completely vaporized in one hit. The rest of the beast's body crashes down, sending a cloud of dust and smoke into the air. It's definitely not getting back up after that. The impact site is a total mess of craters and smoking ruins. The power he just unleashed was insane. Ephidel is still panting, staring at the carnage he just caused. His heart is racing, but he's also kind of impressed with himself. He looks over at the dragon's remains, which are still sizzling with leftover static. There's almost nothing left of the creature. He stares at his small hand, where tiny sparks of lightning are still dancing across his skin. He can feel the power humming through him. It seems he's finally realized something. Even though he's just a 4-year-old in this new world, he's not starting from zero. He still has the exact same mastery he spent 40 years building as Ephidel the Sage. Talent might be 0, but he's already the strongest being on the planet. 3 years have passed since Ephidel's old memories first resurfaced, and honestly, the time has just flown by. The more he studied and researched his new life, the clearer one thing became. He hadn't just been reborn into some random world. He was right back in the same one he'd lived in 4 centuries ago. Life goes on, and someone's at the door. Fraser Alcott is here for his monthly visit. He hands over an envelope with some cash, apologizing that it isn't much for them to live on. Ephidel currently lives alone with his mother, and since neither of them were blessed with any spirit magic, they aren't exactly well off. Now, this guy who just gave them the funds, he is actually Ephidel's dad. This is Alcott Fraser, the second oldest son in the family and Ephidel's big brother. As it turns out, the boy was reborn into a ducal line, one that actually happens to be descended from his own past life. Ephidel asks where their father is, which clearly makes Fraser feel a little awkward. His father is the Duke of Alcott, a major player in the Order of Mages for the Kingdom of Azure. Being a man of high status, the Duke's got a legal wife and 9 other concubines on top of Ephidel's mother. None of those women appreciated sharing their man with someone who had 0 magical aptitude. Because he was born without any talent for magic, Ephidel was treated like an illegitimate mistake. Eventually, the Duke's wife got fed up and kicked them out, leaving them to live in a humble house in the middle of nowhere. Fraser couldn't stand seeing them get treated like garbage, so he does what he can to help. He checks in every once in a while to make sure they have everything they need. While they sit down for some tea, Ephidel knows the odds are stacked against him in this life. But he's not letting that stop him. As long as he can study magic, he'll find his own way back to the top. Fraser takes a sip of his tea and asks what Ephidel wants to be when he grows up. The kid gets all fired up, shouting that he wants to be a mage and enroll in the Academy of Magic as soon as he turns 15. He starts rambling about how he's going to discover ways to improve elemental aptitudes, totally losing himself in the dream. His mother just watches him with a sad smile, knowing the world considers her son absolutely hopeless at magic. Instead of encouraging the impossible, she shuts him down and announces she's having him study swordsmanship instead. Fraser thinks that's a fantastic idea, his eyes practically sparkling. It makes sense considering he's a graduate of that military college himself. He explains that he chose that path as a bit of a rebellious phase, refusing to just follow in their father's footsteps. Magic swordsmen are a rare and valuable asset in the military, so he feels like he made the right choice. Since he's free for the day, he offers to give Ephidel his very first lesson in swordsmanship right now. His mother is way too excited about this, practically crushing Ephidel in her arms as she begs Fraser to go through with it. They head outside, and Fraser starts the training by telling him to put more strength into his wrists. Ephidel starts swinging, and Fraser cheers him on, telling him he's doing great. After just a bit of practice, Fraser is genuinely shocked, telling the kid he's actually got a real knack for the sword. From that day on, whenever Fraser had free time, he spent it tutoring Effital on everything from military fundamentals to general subjects. He's been looking out for his little brother this whole time, likely because of his lack of magic talent. Effital can tell Fraser is really pushing for that military college enrollment, but his heart just isn't in it. After another long day of training, the kid is exhausted and panting. He looks his brother in the eye and tells him he really wants to go to the Magic Academy instead. Fraser just lets out a sigh and kneels down to talk to the boy on his level. He explains that everyone has things they're good at and things they aren't, trying to let him down easy. But Effital is thinking about the bigger picture. The academy might have the answers he needs to break past his current limits. Fraser decides to give him a reality check and offers to show him the spell, challenging him to try and copy it. Fraser makes him a deal. If he can copy the spell, even if it's not perfect, he'll tell the academy dean about his talent. Effital is all over that, jumping for joy at the chance to finally show what he can do. Fraser feels a bit guilty, but he thinks the kid needs a reality check about how tough magic really is. He tells Effital to keep his eyes glued to him because it's about to get real. Fraser strikes a pose, focusing his energy as he prepares to unleash his power. He starts the incantation, calling out to the spirit of the wind to answer his summons. He finishes the chant with a shout, asking for the spirit's blessing to power his attack. Effital just stands there, confused as to why his brother is wasting time with a long speech. Finally, Fraser lets it fly, shouting out, "Wind Edge," as a Tier 2 spell forms in front of him. A massive gale of wind starts swirling in the air, gathering speed and intensity. It slams into a nearby tree with a loud thwack, slicing right through the trunk. The entire tree comes crashing down to the ground, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Fraser is huffing and puffing, but he looks over with a smug grin, asking if the kid is impressed by his divine talent. Effital just stares at the fallen tree, completely underwhelmed. He's like, "Wait, that's it." Without even breaking a sweat, Effital decides to show him how it's really done, firing off his own spell. The sheer power of the blast is terrifying, sending a massive wave of destruction through the woods. The dust settles, and Effital is just standing there casually, while Fraser looks like he's seen a ghost. He's sweating bullets, absolutely losing his mind over how a 7-year-old just pulled that off without a chant. He wobbles on his feet, realizing that what he just witnessed should be physically impossible for a child. Fraser starts stammering, unable to even form a full sentence after that display. Effital realizes he messed up and apologizes, saying he forgot he was supposed to copy his brother's low-tier spell. Fraser screams in disbelief. "Tier 4. Do you even know how high-level those spells are?" Effital tries to play it off, realizing he can't exactly tell his brother he's a reincarnated sage. He makes up a bunch of nonsense about his body, just remembering how to adapt to the magic knowledge he's learned. To himself, he's thinking that back in his prime, even a Tier 10 spell would have been a piece of cake. Fraser's jaw just about hits the floor at the mere mention of Tier 10 magic. His soul practically starts leaving his body as he mutters about how all Tier 10 spells have been lost to history. The shock is just too much for him, and he collapses right there in the dirt, leaving Effital in a total panic. Effital starts to realize that maybe his brother's reaction wasn't just him being dramatic. He thinks back to the time he took down that dragon, and how the people around him reacted then. Everyone thought the gods had saved them because they couldn't explain how the dragon ended up burnt from the inside out. He desperately tries to shake Fraser awake, but his brother is out cold and won't budge. Something is definitely wrong, and Effital realizes he's missing a huge piece of information about this world. He heads back home and starts digging through his books again, determined to figure out what's changed. He finally sees the truth. The overall level of magic in this world has gone through a catastrophic decline. He looks at a classification chart and is stunned. What he used to call daily use magic is now considered low level. Even worse, what used to be high level is now lost lore, and nobody even knows chantless casting is possible anymore. Eventually, Fraser wakes up in bed, and Effital is right there to apologize for messing up. Fraser bolts upright, still terrified as he grabs his brother's shoulders. He demands to know how a 7-year-old kid could possibly cast a spell without saying a single word. Thinking quickly, Effital lies and says that a tree branch actually hit Fraser and knocked him senseless. Fraser is so relieved that he just laughs it off, convinced it was all a weird dream, while Effital keeps testing his powers in secret. Training continues as the days pass by. Effital and Fraser start training together regularly, and Effital even agrees to consider going to the military college just to keep it up. Fraser doesn't go easy on him, shouting out instructions as they spar and telling him to keep charging in. He laughs while correcting Effital's form, pointing out that he's putting way too much weight into his lunge. Effital hits the dirt, but is quick to get back up, secretly knowing he has no intention of ever actually going to that college. He grinds his teeth and pushes through the pain, thinking that his unbreakable will from his past life must still be helping him out. He hates losing even more than before, especially when it comes to swordsmanship, and he demands one more time from his brother. The days turn into weeks of intense, non-stop practice as they clash their wooden swords again and again. Time flies by faster than he expected, and before he knows it, Efodal has reached the age of 10. He continues his training even in the harshest conditions, standing under freezing waterfalls to hone his concentration. His skills with the blade begin to grow rapidly, and he soon finds himself moving with grace that defies his age. Every swing and every parry becomes second nature to him as he pushes himself to the absolute limit. Despite the grueling sessions, Efodal finds himself becoming more and more invested in the art of the sword. His goals have shifted. He's no longer just a mage. He wants to become the strongest magic swordsman this world has ever seen. His thoughts are interrupted by Fraser's voice, calling him over for another day of training. They maintain a strict schedule of 3 training sessions a week, but today, Fraser mentions he has a special guest with him. He steps back with a wide grin, announcing that he won't be the one teaching today because he's brought in a special coach. A massive, heavy footstep thuds against the ground, and Efodal's eyes go wide as a towering figure approaches. The guest is Mariah, the former knight captain of the Knights of Azure, and he is a mountain of a man who dwarfs everyone else. Efodal is momentarily stunned by the man's sheer size, while Mariah looks down at him, ready to see what the kid is made of. He warms up with a series of loud cracks from his joints and tells Efodal to come at him with everything he's got. Fraser waves from the sidelines, encouraging his brother to give the former captain his best shot. Efodal quickly realizes that Mariah is unlike anyone he's ever faced before. His guard is perfect, and he feels like an immovable wall. Mariah taunts him, asking if he came all this way just to stare at him all day long, while Efodal flinches at the man's intense aura. It's not that Efodal doesn't want to move, it's that he's looking for even the slightest opening, and he can't find one. Tired of waiting, Mariah decides to take the initiative and lunges forward with surprising speed for a man of his size. He moves so fast that Efodal barely has time to blink, stunned that he didn't even see the man unsheath his sword. Mariah scoffs, calling him way too slow as he easily deflects Efodal's desperate attempt at a counterattack. Seeing no other choice, Efodal activates mana augmentation, shocking Mariah with his ability to control mana at such a young age. They clash again, and this time, the former captain is impressed, thinking that the kid definitely has what it takes for a recommendation. Fraser watches with pride, explaining that he noticed Efodal was already enveloping his arms in mana during their regular training sessions. He turns to his brother afterward, asking him directly if he truly has that much control over the mana flowing through his body. He goes on to explain that there is a way to enhance physical abilities with magic, but it's a momentary boost that's difficult to master. Fraser is genuinely shocked by how smoothly Efodal can concentrate his mana, noting that he's a natural even without the blessing of spirits. He compares Efodal's proficiency to that of an active sorcerer or even a legendary sage from the old stories. Efodal just gives a little smirk, thinking to himself that it's only natural since he actually was a sage in his past life. Mariah bursts out laughing, amused by the idea that a talentless kid's only real talent is something as advanced as mana control. Efodal grits his teeth, knowing he could end this fight in a heartbeat if he used his high-level magic, but he resists the urge. He tells himself that winning with magic would be completely meaningless in a test of swordsmanship. His determination flares up as he decides that in this specific battle, he is going to win using nothing but his sword skills. He charges forward again, the sound of clashing metal echoing through the training grounds as he tries to find a way past Mariah's defense. Mariah continues to press him, calling him weak and daring him to show even more strength as their duel reaches a fever pitch. Mariah continues to exert his massive physical advantage, telling Efodal that his swordsmanship is still lacking and that their difference in size is what decided the match. He presses his blade down with overwhelming force, scoffing that it's 3 years too early for a runt like him to even dream of winning. Efodal's back is against the wall, but just as Mariah thinks he's won, the young boy reaches out and grabs the giant's arm with a sudden, desperate grip. Using Mariah's own momentum against him, Efodal shifts his weight with blinding speed that catches the former captain completely off guard. With a powerful twist and a loud swoosh, the boy sends the mountain of a man flying over his shoulder in a perfect arc. Mariah can only watch the sky as he's flipped through the air, unable to comprehend how a 10-year-old just threw him. The ground shakes with a heavy dwoom as Mariah lands flat on his back, leaving a cloud of dust and several fallen apples in his wake. Fraser can't help but cheer at the incredible sight, while Mariah lies there in stunned silence, staring up at the canopy of trees. Even Efodal is shocked by his own actions, looking down at his hands as he tries to process what just happened. He realizes his body moved purely on instinct, using a technique he hadn't thought about since his very first life. It was a judo throw he learned 2 lives ago, a skill he never expected to remember, let alone use so effectively in this new world. The silence is broken by Mariah's booming laughter as he sits up, genuinely impressed that the runt actually managed to take him down. He claps Effidel on the back with a series of heavy thuds, conceding defeat and mentioning that he's heard of legendary close-quarter fighters in the East who use similar moves. Frazier runs over with a huge grin, announcing that Effidel has officially passed the test, leaving the young boy completely bewildered. The truth is finally revealed. Mariah isn't just a former captain, but the current headmaster of Azure's military college, and Effidel is horrified by the implications. He stares at them with wide, trembling eyes as the realization of his situation begins to sink in. Frazier happily explains that he secured a spot as a cadet once he turns 15, while Mariah insists that despite being thrown, he's still the superior swordsman. Effidel can only scream internally, wondering how a simple day of training turned into a complete and utter disaster for his future. The sky is darkening fast, and Eris is scrambling to get the laundry inside before the storm hits. She asks Frazier if Effidel is still out there training, worried the kid's going to catch a cold in the downpour. Deep in the woods, Effidel is doing way more than just sword practice, summoning a Tier 10 magic circle that definitely shouldn't exist in this era. A massive pillar of light erupts from the forest, completely vaporizing everything in its path. Effidel stands over a fresh crater, annoyed that casting top-tier spells still has such a long delay. He figures the heavy rain is a blessing since it hides the flashy lights of his training, but Frazier's sudden shouting nearly makes him jump out of his skin. Frazier finally catches up, gasping for air and checking the kid for injuries after seeing the lightning strike so close. Effidel insists he's fine, but Frazier gets dead serious, telling him he's been scouted for the military college next year. The knight warns him to stay safe because this is a huge turning point, though Effidel is mostly thinking about how he easily crushed the last guy who challenged him. In this world, 15 is the age kids are officially considered adults, especially for nobles who are expected to leave the nest and find their own way. Effidel isn't exactly thrilled about the military college and wonders if he could actually make it into the Magic Academy with his supposedly low talent. He makes up his mind right then. No matter what people think, he's going to the academy and proving his worth to everyone. Later that evening, Frazier bursts into the room with what he calls great news. He drops the bombshell. Duke Alcott finally wants to meet the son he's ignored for 14 years. Eris is stunned into silence, while Effidel just stares at his food, wondering what the old man is actually up to. His mom starts sobbing with relief, thinking this means the Duke has finally accepted him as his own. She practically tackles Effidel with a hug, screaming about how proud she is while he struggles to breathe. Effidel is pretty skeptical about a guy who didn't bother checking in for over a decade, but he realizes how much this means to his mother. Even Frazier is getting emotional, clearly happy that his loyalty to the boy might finally be paying off. Eris keeps thanking the knight for being there for them every single day when they had no one else. Watching them celebrate, Effidel decides he'll play along for their sake. These two are his real family, and he'd do anything to keep them smiling. They eventually arrive at the Alcott Palace in the capital, and the place is absolutely massive. Effidel admits he only came for Eris and Frazier, but he's a little curious to see what his descendants have turned into. The interior is just as gaudy as the outside, and the guards quickly usher them toward the main hall. Waiting for them is the man himself, Duke Alcott, looking every bit the arrogant noble. Standing nearby is Joachim, the heir to the house, who looks like he has a massive stick up his you-know-where. Eris bows deeply, while Effidel just walks right in, taking in the scene with a bored expression. Effidel tries to be polite, introducing himself as the son, but the Duke immediately shuts him down. The old man barks at him to address him as Your Grace, making it clear he doesn't consider Effidel his son at all. He calls Effidel an illegitimate disgrace to the bloodline, which is a hell of a way to greet someone after 14 years. The Duke moans about how it brings him to tears that a descendant of the legendary Emperor Stormgale could be so talentless. He even points to a portrait, claiming the great ancestor himself would be crying if he saw this mess. Effidel is actually the one in tears, but it's because he's disgusted by how far his own bloodline has rotted. The Duke shifts gears, mentioning he heard the talentless kid somehow got scouted for the military college for his sword skills. Suddenly, the old man starts laughing, calling the enrollment excellent news, while Eris looks on with a bit of hope. Effidel wonders if he misjudged the guy for a second, thinking maybe he's actually happy for him. But the Duke's face goes cold as he admits the only reason he's happy is that he no longer has to waste money supporting him. He explains that since the school covers expenses and provides a salary, he doesn't have to squander another cent on Effidel's worthless hide. Effidel's face goes completely blank as he realizes this guy is absolute human trash. He can't believe the Duke would say something so vile to his face, but the old man isn't done being a jerk yet. The Duke turns to Joachim, calling the bastard lowly, but noting he still carries the family name for now. He tells Joachim to teach the kid what it truly means to be an Alcott, and make sure he's actually fit for college. Joachim is grinning like a psycho, more than happy to put the dog in its place. Ephitel keeps his cool, realizing this instruction is the real reason he was dragged to the palace. The two of them face off in the center of the massive courtyard, with everyone else watching from the sidelines. Fraser pulls Ephitel aside for some last-minute advice, whispering urgently. As he helps the boy into his armor, Fraser warns him to stay focused. Joachim is a lot more dangerous than he looks. At just 15, Joachim is already considered one of the kingdom's top swordsmen, and he carries himself like he's already won. Fraser reminds him that this isn't just a friendly match. Joachim isn't the type to go easy on anyone, even a younger brother. Ephitel wonders why his own family hates him this much, but he gives Fraser a quick nod to show he's ready. Joachim laughs, taunting him for not running away when he had a chance, but Ephitel doesn't budge. The heir lets out a nasty chuckle, enjoying the power trip. He casually tosses a wooden practice sword toward Ephitel, who catches it with one hand. The boy is caught off guard by the weight. This thing is way heavier than any training blade he's ever held. Joachim reveals it's made from a special, dense wood and mockingly asks if Ephetel's feeble mind can guess what happens if he gets hit with it. He doesn't stop there, shouting that both Ephitel and his mother are absolute idiots. Ephetel's grip tightens on the sword as the verbal abuse starts to get personal. Joachim leans in, telling him that nobody in the family actually likes him or his mother. He calls Eris a talentless pig right in front of her, making her shrink back in shame. He claims she only begged the Duke for a child so she could have a powerful mage in the family, but all she got was a useless waste of space. Joachim's face twists into a monstrous grin as he wishes he could just kill the mother, but decides he'll settle for breaking the son. He takes a stance, mockingly calling Ephitel his bastard brother and offering him a handicap. He tells Ephitel to take the first move, but the boy is just disgusted that someone like this shares his blood. Joachim keeps taunting him, asking if he's too scared to move or if he's already peed himself. He follows up with a truly disgusting comment about his father and Ephetel's mother, laughing like it's a joke. That was the final straw. Ephitel can't believe this monster is supposed to be his descendant. Ephitel lunges forward with a speed that catches Joachim off guard for a split second. Joachim regains his composure and blocks, thinking Ephitel is barely holding on and that Fraser's stories of his skill were just lies. He goes on the offensive, swinging with everything he's got while Ephitel effortlessly slides around his strikes. Feeling pressured, Joachim activates his mana augmentation, certain that this will end the fight right now. But Ephitel doesn't back down. He steps right into the strike and catches the heavy wooden blade with his bare hands. Joachim is paralyzed with shock, unable to understand how a talentless kid is overpowering him. A sickening crack echoes through the courtyard as Ephitel applies just a little bit of pressure. With a single swift motion, he sends Joachim flying across the stone tiles like a rag doll. The air hits the ground hard, his arms shattered and blood pooling around his face. The Duke, Fraser, and Eris are all frozen in absolute disbelief at what they just witnessed. Ephitel stands over his broken brother, warning him never to talk about his mother like that again if he wants to stay alive. As he turns to leave, Joachim tries to shout at him, but he's barely coherent through the pain and missing teeth. Ephitel looks back with cold, glowing eyes and simply says, "I'll kill you." The sheer killing intent in those eyes sends a surge of pure terror through Joachim, who can only whimper in response. He's completely broken, wondering where an inexperienced kid could have ever gotten eyes that look like they've seen 1,000 battlefields. Ephitel drops the heavy training gear onto the ground, the loud clank echoing in the silent courtyard. He walks over to his mother and tells her they're done here, and it's time for them to go home. Eris can only stare at her son in shock, barely recognizing the powerful young man standing before her. Ephitel gives his mother a bright, reassuring smile, reminding her that he's still her one and only son. He reaches out and gently takes her hand, sealing the promise that things will be different now. Eris beams with pride and relief, and they turn to leave the training courtyard together. As they walk away, Ephitel calls out to respected father with a tone that's a lot more mocking than it sounds. He offers a shallow bow, thanking the Duke for the kind invitation, while the old man stews in his own silent rage. Duke Alcott watches them leave with a murderous glare, though he manages to fake a wish for luck in Ephetel's future military studies. Later, while walking through the city streets, Ephitel apologizes to his mom for his earlier behavior, though he's privately disgusted by his descendants. Eris finds his formal apology hilarious, teasing him for sounding like a stuffy, embarrassed parent instead of teenage son. Ephitel laughs it off, but he admits to himself that he's still largely oblivious to the true state of the world he's been reborn into. As the sun sets, Eris urges him to hurry home before they trip, while Ephdal realizes his first real fight will likely be against his own blood. Several days later, the focus shifts to the massive walls and towering spires of the Kingdom of Azure. High up on the ramparts, a commander's voice booms out across the stones, ordering the massive city gates to be opened. A heavy edition echoes through the air as the gates swing wide, revealing the kingdom's military force prepared for departure. Rows of knights in shining armor and heavy halberds fall into formation, ready to march on command. The streets are filled with cheering crowds as the knights of Azure depart for war, with people shouting for them to slaughter their enemies in Greek. From the shadows near Olcott Palace, three hooded figures watch the city's mobilization with keen interest. One of them knocks on the palace doors late at night, announcing their arrival to Duke Olcott. They slip inside the palace halls, discussing how the kingdom's main forces and the knightly orders have already headed from Mount Krisht. Duke Olcott greets them from his study, eager to hear if their barbarian allies are ready for the real plan. Far to the southwest of the capital, a massive army of mercenaries and tribesmen has gathered under the cover of darkness. Their leader rants about the upcoming slaughter, while Duke Olcott smiles to himself, knowing his coup d'etat is finally about to begin. It's been 2 weeks since Ephdal's disastrous reunion with his father, Duke Olcott. Back at home, Ephdal's quiet lunch is interrupted by his mother. He's honestly surprised the Duke hasn't tried to pull any petty revenge stunts yet. That peace is short-lived as someone starts hammering on the front door like their life depends on it. The pounding is so violent it literally knocks Ephdal's food right off the table. He swings the door open to find Fraser and Mariah, and they look like they've just escaped a war zone. Mariah isn't there for a friendly visit. He's covered in blood and says they're in the middle of a massive emergency. Fraser pulls back the bundle in his arms to reveal the baby crown prince of Azure. Ephdal is stunned. He definitely didn't expect to be babysitting royalty today. To see how things went south so fast, we have to jump back 12 hours to the capital. Most of the regular army has been shipped off to the frontier, leaving the city's defense in the hands of the royal guard. Mariah is immediately suspicious about why they're suddenly using fresh recruits to bolster the palace security. Fraser shares some grim intelligence. The Chancellor's faction is officially plotting to move against the baby prince. The kingdom is basically split in two, with a power struggle brewing between the king and the Chancellor. The Chancellor assumed his own son would inherit the crown eventually, but that plan died the moment the king finally had a son of his own. With a direct heir now in the picture, the Chancellor's people started whispering about a cleanup operation. Suddenly, the city is thrown into chaos as mercenaries disguised as barbarians begin storming the gates. Mariah realizes the security shift was a total setup to leave the palace wide open for an invasion. Fraser knows they're out of time. They have to secure the prince and get him out of there before the killers arrive. The assassins aren't holding back, cutting through any guard that stands between them and the cradle. They manage to snatch the prince just as the mercenaries burst into the nursery. With the buildings starting to burn around them, their only escape is a desperate leap through a stained glass window. They spend the next few hours fighting through the city, narrowly avoiding death at every turn. Fraser had no one else to turn to, so he fled toward the only person he knew he could trust. Which explains why they're now standing in Ephdal's living room, looking completely exhausted. Ephdal watches the crying infant, disgusted that someone would actually target a defenseless baby. Fraser confirms that his own father, the Duke, is the one behind the entire coup. Ephdal is fuming. He can't believe his own descendants have fallen this far into corruption. Staying put isn't an option, so they decide the best move is to reach the royal army at the frontier. It's too dangerous to travel through the freezing night air, so they agree to head out the moment the sun comes up. The next morning, the group prepares to leave, but the two veterans aren't going alone. Ephdal steps out in full armor, making it clear that he's joining the escort mission. He remembers how the kingdom honored him in his previous life, and he's not about to let it rot now. As the reincarnation of the legendary Stormgale, he feels a personal responsibility to save this kingdom from his own bloodline. He's not just doing this for the baby, he's doing it for the honor of his name. He's ready to unleash the full wrath of his magic on any of his descendants who dare get in the way. His mother is worried sick, but Ephdal knows he can't ignore his father's treason any longer. The route is set. They'll cross the Moralis Plains and slip through the forest of Near. They're making good time until Mariah picks up a suspicious rustle coming from the brush. It's an ambush. A group of forest thugs jumps out, blocking their path with weapons drawn. The leader demands they hand over the prince if they want to get out of the forest with their lives. Mariah sizes them up. Since one of them has to stay back to hold the baby, they're at a slight disadvantage. He tells the others to stay back while he charges in to clear the path himself. Before the thugs can even react, Ephdal blurs into motion, taking them all down in a single blinding flash of speed. Mariah and Fraser can only stare in disbelief at the pile of unconscious bodies. They didn't even see him move, let alone take out an entire squad in an instant. Effital just stands there calmly, looking like he barely even broke a sweat. Only one terrified survivor is left, and he's currently sprinting away as fast as his legs can carry him, screaming for his mother. Effital starts to give chase, but Fraser quickly shouts for him to stop, not wanting the group to get separated in the woods. Fraser reminds them that they have a mission. Getting the crown prince to the frontier is more important than hunting down every last thug. He's genuinely impressed, telling Effital that he might already be a better swordsman than Sir Mariah. Mariah tries to play it cool, admitting that the kid's speed might be catching up to his own years of experience. But his pride gets the better of him, and he snaps back that there's no way some brat is actually faster than a veteran like him. They decide to put the weird display of power aside for now and push deeper into the forest. The group maintains a steady pace, trying to put as much distance between them and the capital as possible. Suddenly, Effital stops. The birds have gone quiet, and the air feels unnervingly still. Fraser picks up on the tension too. When the animals stop making noise, it usually means something big is about to happen. A series of massive explosions suddenly rocks the forest, the sound echoing through the trees like thunder. Powerful blasts of magic tear through the woods, shredding trees and kicking up debris everywhere. Effital can feel the static electricity building in the air. This isn't just some random attack. It's a high-level magical bombardment. Fraser yells for everyone to dive for cover, realizing they're being targeted by something much bigger than a group of bandits. As the smoke clears, he looks out toward the edge of the forest and goes pale. A massive army is lined up across the plains, flying the black flags of the Ducal Mage Corps. The fact that they're operating so openly means Duke Alcott isn't even trying to hide his treason anymore. Before they can even think of a plan, a massive wall of fire erupts behind them, sealing off their only escape route. The mages are torching the entire forest, planning to burn them alive or force them out into the open. Mariah clutches the baby prince as the infant starts to wail, realizing they're being smoked out like rats in a hole. Mariah looks around desperately, asking if there's any way they can at least get the prince out safely. But Fraser looks at the line of mages and feels his hope slip away. If they charge, they'll be cut down by concentrated magic before they even get close. They're completely trapped between a forest fire and a waiting army. There's literally nowhere left to run. Mariah hands the prince over to Effital, telling him that sometimes you just have to grit your teeth and face the impossible. He's planning to sacrifice himself in a suicide charge to buy the other two enough time to escape through the gap. Fraser stops him, deciding that the only realistic way out of this is for him to go and negotiate with his own father. Mariah thinks he's crazy, but Fraser just gives a sad smile, hoping there's still a shred of humanity left in Duke Alcott. He steps out from the trees with his hands raised, shouting for his father to listen to reason. Standing alone and unarmed against an entire army, Fraser puts everything on the line for the sake of peace. High above the mages, Duke Alcott looks down on his son with a cold, unyielding stare, showing no sign of mercy. Fraser screams out, begging for a stop to the violence. He calls out to the massive army, hoping they can just go home and forget this ever happened. Duke Alcott listens from his platform, calling it a request from his adorable son. The old man decides he'll deliver his answer in person. Fraser is thrilled, thinking his father is actually coming down to talk it out. He runs up to meet him, convinced the Duke is finally honoring his wish for peace. The Duke confirms he understands exactly where Fraser stands. He gives his son a look that's anything but fatherly. Suddenly, he grabs Fraser and activates a lightning release. Massive bolts of electricity tear through the air, frying Fraser on the spot. The guy doesn't stand a chance and hits the dirt, completely unconscious. Effital watches in horror while the Duke just laughs at his own son's body. Without missing a beat, the Duke orders his mages to start their ultimate ritual, a Tier 6 spell they've actually named after the legendary emperor. Effital tries to rush to his brother, but Mariah tells him to watch his back. The ritual strikes the woods, turning the entire area into a massive inferno. Fire and explosions rip through the trees surrounding the group. Effital reaches out toward the flames, his expression shifting from shock to pure rage. Mariah tries to pull him back before the heat swallows them both. The veteran warrior looks back at the fire, realizing Fraser is likely gone. Effital stares at the ground, thinking about how Fraser just wanted to save everyone. He looks at the burning wasteland and asks why. Memories of his brother's kindness flash through his mind. Something inside him finally snaps, and even the air around him starts to feel heavy. He looks up, and the look in his eyes is enough to make Mariah's blood run cold. Mariah senses the terrifying shift in energy, barely recognizing the kid standing there. Ephial decides it's time to show these amateurs what real magic actually looks like. He raises a hand and calmly invokes a Tier 9 spell called Cositis. A wave of absolute zero blasts outward from his position. In a split second, the raging inferno is replaced by jagged pillars of ice. The mages stop dead in their tracks, staring at the frozen landscape. Mariah drops to his knees, stunned that the entire forest was just snap frozen. The army's formation breaks as they try to process what just happened. Duke Alcott is losing it, screaming that a spell of this scale should be impossible for a human. Ephial walks through the frozen wasteland, mocking his own weak water magic. The Duke finally gets a good look at him and realizes it's the talentless son he exiled. Panicked, he orders the Mage Corps to throw everything they have at him. They launch a massive barrage of Tier 5 explosive arrows. The Duke screams for them to kill him as the arrows fly. Ephial just stands there while a rain of magic falls directly on his head. He doesn't even bother to move, closing his eyes as the explosions go off. The whole area turns into a cloud of smoke and fire, and the Duke thinks they've won. But then Ephial just strolls out of the dust without a single scratch, calling their best efforts pathetic. The mages are absolutely losing it, unable to comprehend how anyone could still be breathing after that. Ephial just strolls through the smoke, noting they used a combination of low-tier magic arrows. He looks them dead in the eye and asks if they've ever even heard of an always-active barrier. Duke Alcott's jaw hits the floor, and he can barely get a word out as the terror sets in. Desperate, he screams for them to use their ultimate move, the Tier 6 spell they named after Ephial. Ephial just sighs, calling them a bunch of one-trick ponies while the Duke keeps yelling for the mages to fire. The mages focus their power, unleashing a massive concentrated blast of electrical energy. Ephial is genuinely offended that such a pathetic excuse for a spell carries his name. He doesn't even move, casually invoking a Tier 7 spirit defense formation that dwarfs their attack. The massive blast hits his barrier and just vanishes into thin air, leaving nothing behind. The army stares in complete silence, realizing their legendary ultimate spell was nullified instantly. Ephial laughs, telling them all exactly how pitiful they are compared to real masters. Before they can react, he charges straight into their ranks, moving faster than they can blink. He draws his blade, figuring this is as good a time as any to test his physical skills in a real fight. In a flash, he's already taken ahead, marking his first kill of the morning with a smirk. Panic spreads like wildfire through the formation as the mages realize they're being hunted. Ephial jokes about what kind of title he'll earn today, maybe something like Legion Slayer. He continues the massacre, counting down his victims as blood sprays across the frozen ground. Deciding to mix things up, he infuses his sword with magic, calling out a Tier 2 thunderburst. His blade crackles with raw power as he prepares to let loose a lightning-enhanced slash. The mages are paralyzed with fear, and Ephial just mocks them for thinking their weak arrows would ever work. He strikes again, cold-bloodedly stating that letting these people live would just be a waste of air. The formation completely collapses as mages desperately scramble to get away from the monster. They scream in terror, realizing the kid they're fighting isn't even human anymore. Ephial walks calmly behind them, reminding them that it's bad manners to show an enemy your back. He doesn't stop, slicing through anyone in his path while their lives just fade away. To him, this isn't even a challenge. It feels more like hunting helpless rabbits in the woods. The screams of the dying fill the air, but Ephial doesn't show a hint of mercy. He tells the survivors he's going to show them something truly special to tell their friends in the afterlife. Above them, the clouds begin to swirl and converge, turning the sky dark and heavy. One mage realizes the terrifying truth. This kid is actually controlling the weather itself. Ephial just grins, correcting them that he's summoning real thunder, not the static they're used to. He invokes the Tier 10 spell that carries his name, showing them the true power of the storm gale. Colossal bolts of lightning descend from the heavens, incinerating the army in a blinding flash. A single, massive pillar of light tears through the sky, ending the battle once and for all.